Elisabeth Clay, guys.
Hey,
Hey, how are you doing?
I am well. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Of course. Thanks for having
Awesome.
me on.
I appreciate it. I am truly honored. Female grappler of 2020 as voted on by Flor Grappling. So it's an amazing, amazing honor for me to have you on here. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your time. With that being said, welcome to the Half Guard Half Hour. Guys, my guest, if you didn't hear me before, none other than Flor Grappling's female grappler of 2020, black belt, Elisabeth Clay. Elizabeth, welcome on.
Thanks for having me on here. I'm excited.
Awesome. So we'll jump right in. First question, as usual. I just want to know, recently, as one of your followers, somebody who's been podcasting for a little bit, been following you. You recently posted a story or a photo of you back in the day, 7 or 8 years ago, when you first started jiu-jitsu as a white belt. Can you talk me through a little bit of what got you started, what got you interested, why jiu-jitsu instead of any other martial arts?
Yeah, for sure. So I was a gymnast for about 10 years. I started gymnastics. I was like 18 months old. All my older siblings were elite gymnasts, so that's kind of like the household that I grew up in. We moved up to Alaska in 2010, and I started gymnastics up there, and I just wasn't getting the hours that I needed. So I ended up quitting just because like I wasn't going to do something if I couldn't go anywhere with it. And with the lack of hours that I was getting, like it wasn't ever going to go anywhere. So I was out of a sport for a little bit, and I was looking at like figure skating or something. I had no desire to do like jujitsu or any type of martial arts. So I was looking at like figure skating, diving, something that was somewhat similar to gymnastics, so that I still had that same kind of thing. And for any of you guys that know anything about like gymnastics is one of the most expensive sports out there. One of the only sports more expensive is figure skating. So yeah. So my mom was kind of a little hesitant on that when we were still looking at it. But one of my older brothers wanted to try MMA. He never tried it. But I was like, oh, like I'll give jujitsu a try. Like I had no desire to do the MMA part, but I was like, I'll give jujitsu a try. So I gave it a try, and like really fast, I kind of just immediately fell in love with it, and I immediately started training like 5 days a week, and just kind of went from there.
Awesome. So, with your background, starting out as a white belt, moving up through the ranks, white, blue, purple, brown, and black, for people listening that might not know how the jiu-jitsu belts work, what has been your toughest part of your journey so far through the ranks, coming up now, most recently getting your black belt? What do you feel has been the toughest part of your journey so far?
Oh man, that's kind of hard. Like, so the first time I started at, it ended up not working out there, and I had definitely a lot of challenges there. As far as like being a kid in it, and then like just the gym in general, like it wasn't necessarily the best environment, especially for somebody so young. So that was kind of hard on me then, but I definitely think it made me part of where I am. Like it hit the point when I was training there that like I didn't want to train. I didn't want to be there, but like I still made myself, I was still training 5 days a week, multiple times a day, because I knew like deep down, like I still love the sport, but I just wasn't loving it because of where I was at. So I kept making myself train because of that. And I ended up being able to find another gym after things didn't work out there. But I was actually done competing when I moved up to Legacy up in Anchorage, the Aries affiliate. I was done competing, and I ended up competing like 2 months after moving there, I think, because I had fallen back in love with it. But my thing, I was like, okay, like I'm done competing until like I fall back in love with the sport. And luckily, like it was such a good environment that I was able to fall back in love with it pretty fast. But that's one thing that like, as far as being grateful to somebody, the person that's probably impacted my career the most would be Jordan Contra, which is kind of funny. Like, not that there have other people that have helped me like technique wise more, that have better technique or bigger names or whatever, but I was in such a bad place when I got there. Like, I was done. I was not okay. That everything that he did for me and like got me where I was and helped me like be able to have the right mindset was insane, because like I had already won double gold Pan Ams, I had won gold and silver worlds. Like I was obviously, like I was doing okay competition wise, but like mentally I wasn't in a good spot. Like I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And so like I was in a bad spot going there, and that helped a lot. And then probably outside of that, toughest was 2019. I had a really tough competition year. So I started off the competition year I separated my AC joint a week before Europeans.
I've
I
been
still
there.
went and yep, I still went and competed Euros. So you've had an AC joint separation. It's extremely painful.
Yeah.
Like I've dislocated this shoulder a bunch. I've had a lot of injuries, but an AC separation is extremely painful. And it was just in training. It was a silly thing. Defending an armbar, guy went, scooped my arm, and it literally like completely pulled my shoulder out of socket. A week before Europeans, and so I still went. Me being me, I still went and competed Euros. I ended up losing my first match by advantage, and that was the first time I'd ever lost first round. I never lost first round. I never not podiumed. So I made it all the way to purple, and I never not podiumed. So I went. I didn't podium, and then I think I can't remember if it was Pan Am's next or trials next, but I think it was Pan Am's next. I went and competed Pan Am's. Double third there, which for most people, like double third's not bad, but for me, I was used to, being top of the podium. Like even silver was kind of rough for me. So double bronzed, and then that was rough. And then I had trials and I got third there. And then so like it was just a rough competition year. And then training up for worlds, getting there, I was having issues like I was getting really dizzy in training and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And didn't do great at worlds, went through, ended up finding out that I had a heart condition, and that's why I was getting dizzy and stuff like that. So taking care of that and getting everything back. So I went from having a super rough competition year, and then it was later that year that I got my brown belt, and then I won double gold at Nogi Worlds by all submissions. So I think that like the roughest points, once you come out of them, you end up coming out of them strong, but it's, sometimes it can be hard to come out of those spots because it doesn't feel like it's going to end. After worlds, I told my mom, I was like, and my entire team, like I told them, I was like, I can't figure out what's wrong with me. Like I'm done competing because I'm not competing like an athlete. I'm like, there's something wrong. And so like, I've had like 2 points in my career where one of them I was just taking a break till I fell back in love with it. And the other one I was like, if I don't figure out what's wrong, like I'm done. I quit. And I think I actually said that in the Flor Grappling video after I won Nogi Worlds.
For sure. So, as a top competitor, and I definitely have questions for you in that regard. What was your biggest takeaway out of these two instances of hard times for yourself, and for anybody out there watching that wants to compete or is going through a rough time? Whether I know you addressed plateauing recently. What advice would you give to anybody out there that maybe is either hitting a plateau or hitting a rough patch in their journey, a year-long stretch like yours, where you were trying to figure things out? What did you take away from that, and what advice would you give people?
The biggest advice that I would give people is one, if there's a physical issue, like a lot of mine I was like physically injured, is one, if you're going to keep competing through it, which probably is not the smartest thing, but for any athlete out there, you're going to keep competing through it. Let's be honest. You need to know that going in, and you need to adjust your game for it. And then also you got to kind of think about that, like later on, it's going to affect it, whether you do or not. Like people will look back, they don't care that I was hurt, but they'll go, oh, you had this result here and this result there. But for me, what I gained from it was worth having that and looking back on it. So, and then persistence is a big thing. Like you're going to come out of it. It sucks. Plateaus happen. You're always going to hit plateaus. It never goes away. And I think that's one thing being an upper belt that I think a lot of the lower belts don't realize is it's not that we stop hitting those plateaus. It's the fact that we're so used to them that we know, don't get me like, it's still just as frustrating. Like sometimes I'll hit plateaus in training and like it sucks, but I know that if I keep training and I keep going through, I'm going to come out of it. Whereas when you're a lower belt or it's your first plateau, your second, your third, you don't know that. And so it's frustrating because you're going and you're like, what's wrong with me? And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just one of those times. Like I've told people before, sometimes you just have a belt and that belt's just cursed. Like, I don't know what it is.
I agree.
There's like, I've seen people that go and like do great at blue. They suck at purple. Then they hit brown and they win. And the thing is, I've seen like literally from like 1 month to the next. And you're fighting good people too. It's not like they hit a division, there's nobody good at brown belt. Like the people are probably even better, but there's just something, sometimes that belt is just cursed. And I don't know what it is. And that's just how it is. And then also, so one, persistence and keep going through. Know you're going to come out of it. Don't feel bad to ask someone for help. It's not a bad thing to ask for help. And then one thing that I found helps me a lot is mentality. That's a big thing that I think that a lot of people overlook in jiu-jitsu or in sports in general is how much mentality helps. Like, I listen to motivational stuff all the time, especially like right before I'm competing. Because I just think it helps, and I think that mentality helps. And because like the body will give out way before the mind does. But the thing is, if you can train the mind, you can keep pushing. Your body will keep going as long as your mind will keep pushing it. So
100%. And I agree. Plateaus do happen. As a brown belt, and 3 years, almost 3 years into being brown belt, every belt has that plateau. And I think I agree with you 110%. The lower belts, I remember being a blue and a purple belt, being like, why the fuck can't 6 months, 7 months, 8 months of just
yeah,
hitting this wall, man? And it was just like, what is wrong with me? And now being a brown belt, it's like, no, this is just going to continue to happen throughout my
yeah,
journey. So
exactly.
um, speaking of, as a black belt now, and even previous, you've been teaching and coaching a lot. One of the things that I'm curious about as a woman competitor and as a woman coach, what advice do you give other women? I know you do a lot of women's only seminars. You have one coming up, a Zoom seminar, I believe, Girls and Geese. What advice do you give other women? Because, up until the last couple of years, jiu-jitsu, just like MMA, was a male-dominated sport, right? Or it was seen as a male-dominated sport. So girls coming into the sport now, white belt, blue belt level girls, what advice do you give them when they're in a room and they might be the only girl, or there's only one other girl and they're training with 80% of the room being men? What advice do you give to the girls out there who are looking up to you or asking you how you dealt with it coming up through the ranks?
So most of my seminars are actually co-ed. I prefer to do co-ed stuff. I'm not gonna, this is probably gonna step on a lot of toes. I'm not a huge believer in the whole like we need women's only seminars and we need women. I think it can be great in small doses. I think it's a great, like, women's only classes are great if you have somebody that's completely uncomfortable training with guys to use for the first month or two. But I think a lot of people get pigeonholed with it. A lot of women get pigeonholed with it and they get too comfortable with it. And I think that actually ends up setting you back with it. And then you end up sitting in this mentality of, I only want to train with girls. And you're only going to get so good by training with other girls. And the thing is, and that's not saying that there aren't other great women out there, but it's small. And also, how many women would get upset if a guy went, well, I don't want to train with you. You're not good at training for me. And you're basically doing that to them by saying, I only want to train with other women. So one big thing that I tell women when they're first coming in, if they're asking me for advice, one, I'm like, you guys can see most of the time I train with other guys. I'm not training with other, like, I'll train with other girls. Don't get me wrong. There are other girls in the gym. But as far as my like top hard roles, it's with men. Because those are a lot of times the competitors that are stronger. A lot of times they can move faster, and it is a different style. So I do think it's important to still roll with women, but it's important to not pigeonhole yourself on just because you're a woman to train with other women. I think that that's a big problem that has come up in the sport is it was so heavily male dominated that to almost try and compensate for it, it's been overcompensated by going too much the other way of we want women's only trainings. We want women's only classes. We want women's only seminars. I only want to train with other girls. I only want to go to a school that's got a bunch of other girls. And while if that's personally what you want, that's not a bad thing, but I don't think that's the way for everybody to go. I think it's important to train with other men, especially if you're getting into it for self-defense, which a lot of the women that want to train with other girls only get into it purely for self-defense. You're getting into it not because women won't attack people, but for the most part, when they get into it, it's against men attacking them, right? That's why they get into it for
Yep.
self-defense. Why are you only going to train with other women? Men move different than women move. That makes no sense to me. If you're getting into it for self-defense purposes, to then only train with women, because it's going to be different. Men are stronger, they move different, and they're going to handle things differently. And so one thing that like I tell all the girls when they come in, and I'm the odd one, like I'll have people, oh, it's great, we've got all these girls, and I'll go and I'll pipe in and I'll go, yeah, but you still should be training with the guys. I think it's great that you have that. You have women. I think it's great to have that group when you're asking something about like what sports bra do I wear? How do you handle this? Like things that are specifically to that. But when it comes to actual training, I think it's important to train with men and women and to not pigeonhole yourself on just training with other women.
For sure. So jujitsu is a family affair. As one of your followers, I see your brother also trains with you. How do you sit across in a room, and I don't know, you may not have a problem with this, watching him train, what advice have you given your brother, as, I know he's a blue belt now, what advice have you given your brother to advance in the sport? And have you ever had a situation where you're sitting across watching him roll, maybe with a higher level belt, and he's in a rough spot that you want to jump in as a sister and say something? Like, how do you not do that to hinder him?
So now I coach him more, but at first I didn't coach him at all. Like he would be in the same classes. I would even be teaching kids classes and he would be there and I would have one of the other instructors go over to help him. I only started teaching him when he came up and asked me. Like I made him come up and ask me. I made him come up and say, "Hey, I want you to coach me." And I even at the point I was like, "Are you sure?" Because you're asked, like, not only are you asking me to coach you, you want to be an athlete as well. You know how hard I am on myself. You're my brother. I'm going to be not as hard on you as I am on myself because you would die because I'm so hard on myself. But like, no, like I'm ridiculously hard on myself. But like, I'm going to be harder on you than anyone else ever will. And like, I made him, so he was probably training for 4.5, almost 5 years before we got to the point where I was actually coaching him. Like I would just kind of let him in, like it would get frustrating and seeing it, but I just kind of turn around, walk away and do my own thing. Before that point. But when he came up and I like made him ask me, because I think that's a big problem that people just jump in when it's family or it's their husband, it's their wife, it's their sibling, and it can make it really frustrating. So I wanted it to be his own thing that he loved regardless, and then came to ask me for help if he then wanted help. And so that's how it is. Like when we go to competitions, I'm the one that coaches him. Like he had a competition over in Arizona and I flew over literally just to coach him and then I flew back. But I always ask him when I'm doing this, I'm like, "Hey, do you want me to coach you? You want Kashino? You want Samir? You want someone else? Do you want them to coach you and me just there? Like, what do you want?" And every time he wants me to coach him. And it's kind of funny because I actually would rather not coach him because I get super nervous coaching him. Now I'm at the point where I would rather be the one to coach him, even though I do, because he performs better when I'm coaching him because I know his game inside and out. Like I know the mistakes he's going to make before he makes them because I know his game inside out. But as far as like the coaching him at the gym or whatever, a big thing that we would run into, it wasn't even him, it would be other people. They're like, "You're so mean to him." And I'm like, no. They're like, "He's going to hit a point and he's going to hate you." And I'm like, "No, because he's asked me for this." And I even told him, I was like, "If you ever hit a point that you don't want this anymore, that you don't want me to coach you anymore, that's fine. I won't get my feelings hurt. Tell me and I'll stop." Like it'll stop just like that. That's it. But I'm going to coach you how I'm going to coach you until that point. Like he had this really bad habit when he was younger, when he was probably like 13 or 14, where he would leave his arm out and he super flexible. He'd be able to get out of arm bars, but he would like, his arm was straight. And I literally told him, I went up to him and excuse my language, but I was like, "I'm going to break your fucking arm." I was like, because I'd rather be the one to break your arm than someone else to break it. I was like, because at least if I break it, I'm going to break it straight. I'm not going to spiral it. I'm not going to I'm going to break it in the right place because you have to learn. And the thing is, I would rather be the one that has to do that to you than have it happen in competition when you're really going to get hurt. Like if it happens, then it's going to be, not only is it going to be broken, it's going to be a bad break. And, or one of the stupid white belts is going to grab your arm, one of the stupid blue belts, it's going to muscle it and they're going to break it and it's going to be really bad. And I like in the middle, he had just, it was a in-house competition and in the middle he had just won it and I go, "Good job, but if you don't fucking stop, I'm gonna break your damn arm," in front of everyone and like the whole gym, people are there and they're just staring at me and I'm like, and they're like, Liz and I'm like, this is my thing. Like if he doesn't want me to do this, he can tell me, "I don't want you coaching me anymore." We're good. He can go get coached by someone else and I'm not gonna get my feelings hurt. But like I yelled at him because the thing is, I would rather be the one to do it than have someone else do it. It's kind of that like philosophy, like we bleed in, we sweat in here so we don't bleed out there. So it's kind of the same thing. Like I always tell him, I'm like, somebody might be stronger than me, they might be bigger than me because you're gonna fight people because he's bigger than I am. I was like, but ain't nobody gonna be meaner to you than I am. And so you're gonna be used to it.
Sounds like some family love. I had a cousin like that growing up when we were growing up and kids and I was getting bullied in school. He's like, "I'm going to beat you up in the house so that way when you're getting bullied in school, you're meaner than that bully." So kudos to you on that. You've had an amazing end of 2020. one of the things that, happened for you at the end of 2020 was receiving your black belt. Can you walk me through what that moment was like for you, what that felt like, and what it means to you today to be a black belt?
So it wasn't a surprise that I was getting my black belt. I think I was told like 2 weeks before or something, or sometime before. So I knew I was getting it, but it didn't actually, I thought I was gonna cry when I got it. It didn't hit me until literally like 14 hours later. So I got promoted right before the Aries party, right? So we had like our big end of the year promotion, and then we had the Aries party. I didn't cry until literally like the last like 10 minutes of the party. Like I think it just finally hit me. Like it didn't even like oh, I was excited, like I got my black belt, and I was like, oh, I didn't cry. That's kind of weird, right? Like 14 hours later, I'm at the party. It's about to end, and I'm just like, ugh. But for me, it's just I don't even know that it's still fully set in yet. Like I've got it probably, what is it, like 3 months ago now. I still don't know that it's fully set in yet because it's just such a big thing, and like it's been a goal for such a long time. It's kind of like after winning a big competition, like you're like, oh, this is great, and then you're kind of like, did it really just happen? You know? But it's amazing, it's been a lot of work putting in. I've had a lot of people tell me that I wouldn't hit it, and I definitely wouldn't hit it at this age. Um, so it's great, it's just the beginning. So I have my color belt career, and now I'm starting the real deal.
Awesome. So one of this past year, besides one of the many competitions, one of the things that impressed me the most about you was issuing the challenge to Gabby Garcia. Right? Everybody knows who she is in the jiu-jitsu community. She's doing MMA over in Japan. She's a very, very big lady. She's a super heavyweight, and you're what, 5'4", I think,
Yeah.
5'3", right? You're not a big lady. So you issued this challenge through social media, and one of the promotions made that fight happen. What was it like for you? One, what like prompted you to issue these challenges? And two, what was it like stepping onto the mats with a Gabby Garcia, multiple time world champion for the longest time? What was that process like for you, and what did you do to train maybe differently for somebody like her versus somebody who you're competing at a weight class like IBJJF?
So, this is a fight that I've obviously, like, it's kind of one of those, especially competing in the heavyweight division at ADCC. I was like, oh, like I'm gonna have this match eventually, whatever, whatever. And then Seth had actually asked me about it. He's like, oh, have you ever fought Gabby yet? And I was like, no, I haven't fought Gabby. He's like, well, would you fight Gabby? I was like, yeah, I'd fight Gabby. And so we've been working on kind of trying to set up that fight for a little bit, actually, before I had actually said that I wanted to fight her, like, at Fight to Win. We've been kind of slowly trying to work on it, and basically they wanted me to work up more, and so that was just kind of the easiest way. Is like they kept being like, one more fight, and then I'd have that fight, and they'd be like, one more fight, and then I'd have that fight, and they'd be like, one more fight. And so Seth was kind of like, hey, let's just kind of push it, and I was like, okay, like let's push it, let's just call her out, we'll get the fight going. So after I did that, like we got the fight going pretty fast, and the biggest thing that I had with that that was different was basically just training with bigger training partners. So we had some of our guys come in that were bigger and that heavier so that they could kind of put the pressure on a little bit more, and just having that strength. And so that was the biggest thing, and how I like switched up my training. Like I still had a lot of my like regular roles, but I would supplement that in with the bigger people. And so that was my like main training. And then when they needed a break because we were going so much, I go grab someone else, and then do that. And then as far as like how it felt stepping on the mat with Gabby, honestly, I felt great out there. I wasn't really nervous. I actually have a video that I haven't posted, but I was like, if people saw that this is how I was like acting like 2 hours before, they would never believe it. Like I'm in the hotel room, like joking and laughing with my teammates and like just cracking up and making jokes. So I felt really good out there. Like I really wasn't nervous. I thought I was going to be more nervous, but I wasn't nervous at all. I felt great out there, and I felt really confident. So good.
And that ultimately, at the end of the day, is the biggest win, having that mentality. So prepping for competition, whether it's a Gabby Garcia fight, super fight here, Fight to Win, whatever it is, what is your physical prep look like when you're prepping for big matches or any kind of match? And what's more your mental game like? Because I think, like you said earlier, the body gives out before the mind. So where do you see, or how do you prep yourself mentally and physically, but more so mentally, to get out there and do this?
So a lot of the mental side of it is like I'll listen to if you guys have like Spotify or Apple Music, you guys can look up Fearless Motivation is a really good one. I like a lot of the stuff they have out there. And then CT Fletcher. Those are like my two favorite people to listen to, and I like what they have. A big one that CT Fletcher has out there is it's confidence basically is what it's labeled. And basically he goes on to talk, and I'll send this to some people who didn't know me as well before, and they're like, oh, like I thought you were super cocky at first, and then I get to know you and you're not. And I was like, here, just go listen to this. This will kind of give you like a little bit of an idea. And basically what it talks about is how confidence is so important, but confidence and arrogance are so close to each other that a lot of times confidence is mistaken for arrogance. But there's a huge difference between the two in actual mentality. So if you guys have a chance, you should go listen to that one. And then Fearless Motivation also has one that's called Failure. And basically it talks about how every successful person has a ton of failure, but the only difference between successful people and losers is the fact that failures don't stop them. They're just blocks along the way. Whereas other people, they'll stop at the first or second failure. And so if you have a chance to go listen to those two specific ones, but just any of the ones that they have out from those two people, I really like those. And as far as like the physical aspect of it, my training pretty much stays the same. My lifting, like as far as like time, stays the same, but I just kind of ramp it up more. Like I'll lift heavier, I'll lift closer sets together, um, just to kind of, instead of just going in to kind of maintain and get a little bit stronger, I'll do it a lot heavier and go just like closer sets so that it builds more, burn my body out more, fatigue more. And then as far as in training, when I'm in my off season, we don't really have an off season,
Yeah.
but an off season, I'm more working on like stuff that I want to work on and just stuff that I want to do. So more like my B game, or not even necessarily my B game. It can be stuff that's not even in my game at all, but that I want to put in. Whereas when it's closer around competition, I'm training harder. I'm actually going after stuff. I'm not going to let stuff go as easy, because like when I'm training, like I'll be training, I'll get submissions, but I'll let like 4, 5, 6 go before I hit one. And when it comes to actually like training right before competition, it's not like that. Like even the guys, so I'm doing the Dallas Open, and I think it was like Wednesday, and I was like, oh yeah, sorry guys, you guys are gonna have to deal with me. I was teaching, and I was like, you guys are gonna have to deal with me being a little more amped up. And one of the guys was like, I could tell on Monday when we rolled that you had a competition coming up, and I was like, it's different. They're like, no, like it's fine, but you were not playing, and that's the difference. And so I think that's the big difference, is like I kind of quit like not necessarily messing around as much, but like messing with stuff as much, and just start focusing on like my actual A game and what I want to do.
For sure. No, that definitely makes sense. One of the things that when I talk to high level competitors, that I'm always curious about is the other side of the coin, right? We don't always win. You don't always get up there and get the W. How do you deal with a loss when it happens? And what do you take away from that loss back into the room?
First of all, losses suck. That's one thing that I've always told people, is I was like, winning isn't that good. For anybody that's won, like it's really not that good. Like you build it up and it doesn't really like feel like anything when you have it. It's not that winning's that good. It's that losing sucks that bad. And a big thing is like, especially at this point, mistakes are so much smaller than before. So a lot of times I'll just try to see if there's anything that I did wrong. Or a big thing that I took away is the fact that, like, especially at this point, I need a coach there. It makes a big difference. I'm used to doing stuff by myself, not needing a coach. I'll go fly by myself. I'll go compete by myself. I don't need anything. I'm good. And it's hit the point that like it makes a big difference now having a coach versus not having a coach and having that there. So I can't do that as much anymore. So that was a big takeaway for me. It wasn't even like necessarily the actual jujitsu as much as it was like, okay, you actually might need someone now instead of going and doing stuff by yourself and then being fine. And it's kind of crazy for me to hit that point, because I've basically done stuff by myself, not every competition, but like been able to do like small competitions or even super fights and stuff by myself since I was a blue belt. So to now finally like hit black belt when like I feel like at the point where you're like, oh, I hit black belt, I'll be fine. It's not before. No, I need to coach even more now than I did before. So that's a big takeaway. And then just kind of looking at it, and instead of using it as like, oh, now I'm sad, like go use that as motivation, go train harder, go work harder. And that's going to be the big difference between who makes it and who doesn't, is if you let that loss sit and mess with you, or if you let that loss fuel it and go more. And not only like back in the gym, you can't let it mess you up mentally either. I think a lot of people do that. They might go and train, and you might be doing great in the training room, but if you let that mess you up mentally, it doesn't matter.
For sure. So is there anything out there at the black belt level, or anyone out there at the black belt level currently, that you're looking to try to set up a super fight with, or looking to compete against as a black belt? Is there any female competitors, any competitors in general, that you'd love to get into the ring with and get out there and fight up, coming up in 2021?
Obviously I want to rematch with Gabby. I think everybody knows that. That would be great, having a fight with like Bia Mosquito or some of those names, people at the top. Basically anybody that's at the top, I'd be down to fight.
Awesome. So last question, and before I let you go, 2020 Female Grappler of the Year. That honor, it's a big field to come about. A big field. Flor Grappling named you Female Grappler of the Year for 2020. What was that honor like for you, or what was it like for you to get that honor and get that mention of being the Female Grappler of 2020? What did that mean to you, and how do you feel about it today?
So when I got the text, so obviously like I knew before they announced it. So I got the text, like I was doing like a little happy dance. I called my mom. I was like, Mom, guess what? And like told her, I was like, I just want Female Grappler of the Year, because like I didn't think I was gonna win it, even though like I had people messaging me and they were like, we're all voting for you. If you don't win this, it's all rigged. And I was like, okay, whatever. But like I didn't expect to win it. And like I was getting a ton of messages like that, and I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then I get in the message and they're like, oh, like you won Female Grappler of the Year. And not only that, like we had more votes this year than we've had before. And so I was just like, oh shit, like I actually won it. But it's just great, especially like I spent most of that year, obviously I was fighting black belts and high level black belts too, not just random black belts. But I was a brown belt most of that year.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get my black belt until November. So it was just great. And for me, it was just like, okay, this is a good way to like start out 2021, because my year started out a little rough. But then that happened and I was like, you know what? No, it's going to be a good year. We're going to have a good year. And this is setting the pace for everything. So it's just great. And I hope to just continue on that for the rest of the year.
Make a run as like a president or something in politics. 2022, here we come. Or sorry, 2021. I apologize. Fast forwarding. I think the pandemic has me a little bit confused. Elisabeth Clay, thank you so much for being a part of the Half Guard Half Hour. It was amazing. I'm super humbled, super honored to have taken this time to talk to you, to get to know you a little bit better. Anything you want to close out with? Any closing messages or closing notes you have for the people listening later on Spotify or here on Instagram Live currently?
Work on your mental game is the most important part. And thank you guys for all the support.
Awesome. Guys, Elisabeth Clay, Female Grappler of 2020, as voted on by you guys. Elisabeth, thank you so much for being a part of the Half Guard Half Hour. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. Of course.
Bye.
Bye.